So this is a video for GCSE Edexcel Business Studies students. It's topic 1.2, show and enterprise, and this video is about specifically thinking creatively. This is designed for those people on the A star below and below GCSE rather than the new 9 to 1 GCSE, but anyone could potentially find it useful. As always, I'll be talking pretty quickly. What I really want my students in year 11 to be doing with this video is to take what's being said and convert it into your own notes. That translation of the information into your own notes, potentially with a bit of revision on Tutor to You, Business B, GCSE Bite Size, possibly coming and asking me a few questions in lesson, but trying to make some revision notes with this video. That's where it's absolutely key. That's where the information will stick and will retain for when you head the exam. We've got 5 key terms: thinking creatively, competitive advantage, deliberate creativity, lateral thinking and blue sky thinking. Now, interestingly, this topic doesn't really show up in the new specification, and the reason, personally, I think for that is the distinction between lateral thinking and deliberate creativity and thinking creatively. I think the definitions are really tricky. I don't anticipate that these definitions will come up much in the mix and match at the back of the Unit 1 exam, because I think, honestly, trying to distinguish between them is a bit tricky, and I think it's part of the reason why it's getting dumped for the new specification. But for those people who are, it's 2017 at the minute, and for those people who are doing the exam in 2018, you still need to be able to answer questions on this, and it has come up before, and I expect it will come up again. Thinking creatively is just coming up with new ideas. Essentially, that's what the question is asking. Where do new ideas come from? And specifically, in this case, how can we generate new ideas? And so we've just got a few pictures on there of things where new products have come about. Obviously, the old Nokia N95 isn't a new idea, but it was a product which came about and ultimately, arguably, led to the very first smartphone by Apple, as the N95 was a few years before. We've got the Fitbit, and obviously that was quite a creative idea, and then some stand-up desks, so that students can work in a way which is a bit more productive for them and allows them a bit more flexibility. With creative thinking comes competitive advantage. Now, this is probably most useful for those people who are doing the Unit 1 exam, Unit 3 exam, thinking about the idea of competitive advantage. If we can come up with a new idea, if we can think creatively about how to solve a problem, then it should lead to a real advantage for us over our competitors. And we can see from this graph here that back there in 2008, this Nokia N95, possibly one of the best phones I ever had at the time, loved it. It was there. It was doing really well, selling a couple of million units. Equivalent to where Apple was at the time. But you can see that very quickly during that period, all the way up to 2010, that Apple absolutely skyrocketed, and Nokia went into a period of instability and some downward trends within sales, but then ultimately we know the history of Nokia, and moving forward 7 years from this point, it's in a bit of a terminal decline. The ability to come up with new ideas, the ability to do things in a different way is absolutely critical, and fundamentally, unfortunately for Nokia, it was the flaw, their Achilles heel was the inability to come up with something new. So, if we look at deliberate creativity, lateral thinking, what are the ways that we could do it? Well, we could brainstorm. For those people that aren't sure what a brainstorm is or more commonly, quite often known nowadays as a thought shower, but on the specification is brainstorm, so we'll use that term, is people just coming up with ideas. So you sat in a business meeting and you say, we need to come up with a new chocolate bar, what's anyone got? And just get everyone's their first thoughts. What are their ideas? Just get some ideas down on paper, and then you can discuss the good, the bad, and you can move forward with them. Mind maps, you should have all seen mind maps by now, an idea conceived by Tony Buzan, I think about in the 1960s, a central idea from which spider tentacly arms go off, which allow you to link ideas from this central idea to ideas around the edges. Lists, as ridiculous as it might sound, a way to come up with new ideas or a way to think about things more creatively is look at a product, list everything that you can see, and then take it from there. Use the ideas that you've got on the paper. If you think back to any of the times that you've been in business studies lessons and teachers have asked you to do something, come up with something, think about something, one of the hardest things to do is to get started. And a lot of these lateral thinking, deliberate creativity ideas are just about encouraging you to write something down. Once something's on paper, then you can start to discuss it, you can start to make it better. Even if what you're writing down is absolute rubbish, at least you can then critique it and say, well, why is it rubbish? How could it be better? What does it need to be better? And that gets that ball rolling. Blue sky thinking, I suppose in some ways very similar to brainstorming, mind maps and lists all linked together. Blue sky thinking is sometimes referred to as thinking outside the box. A sheet of paper and trying to come up with completely different ideas, not coined from the phrase blue sky, because the blue sky above us is infinite. So it's about saying not being constrained by the ideas that we have. And then de Bono's thinking hat is a way to consider a lot of these ideas. Quite useful for lateral thinking because it encourages us to think of things from a variety of different viewpoints. And I'll show you a picture on de Bono's in a moment. If you know this list for the exam, these 5, and you know that they are ways of thinking creatively and you know they are ways of lateral thinking, then you should be pretty much alright for the exam, to be honest. But it is a case of committing these to memory and then interpreting what's being said in the exam. So here we have de Bono's 6 thinking hats. De Bono essentially said, when you're considering problems, make sure that you are not considering it from a very negative point of view, a very positive point of view, but that you incorporate creativity, which was the green hat, that you incorporate feelings, that you incorporate neutrality and information, facts and figures, and that you also have caution and a critical eye. So either as one person trying to consider an idea, you make sure you go through the process of considering it with all the different hats on, so to speak, or if you've got multiple people in a group, you allocate them roles. You are going to consider it from a negative point of view, you are just going to look for facts, figures and information, so on and so forth. This is actually represented pictorially here as a mind map. Mind map here, central idea, which was de Bono's thinking hat, and then coming off it is the spider tentacle type things, which then lead into other ideas and notions, which are sort of branches off the main idea. So don't forget, thinking creatively gains the competitive advantage. Now this is particularly useful in your Unit 3 exam. If we are being creative, it could be lists, mind maps, brainstorms, comparisons. Blue sky thinking and thinking hats are types of creative thinking, sort of names, brand names almost, for thinking creatively. So let's have a look at a question. Gail prefers to use lateral thinking techniques as a way of developing new business ideas. Which 2 of the examples are lateral thinking techniques? First of all, you need to identify it's 2 that we're looking for, and then secondly, it's going through the motions of which ones do we know could be right, which ones are definitely not accurate. So before I carry on, if you just want to pause the video and have a think, which would be your 2 answers? Okay, hopefully you've had a think about this, and I'll talk you through my process now. So here we are, mind mapping. Is that a lateral thinking technique for developing new business ideas? Yeah, I think it probably is, but I'm going to give it a question mark. Brainstorming business ideas with a group. I think I've seen that before. I think that's probably right, but I'll give it a question mark. Producing a business plan. Is that a way of developing new business ideas? Well, it's within that realm, but I don't think that's what I'm after. But I'm going to give it a question mark anyway, because maybe when you're creating a business plan, you could come up with new ideas. So I'll give that a question mark. Providing a wide range of products. Is that a way of developing new ideas? No, it's not. If you've got new ideas, then you probably have a wide range of products, but it's not a way of developing those ideas. So it's definitely no to that. And then producing a cash flow forecast, does that develop new business ideas? Definitely not. So we're ruling out D and E straight away. We come back and we ask ourselves, what was the question again? Gail prefers to use lateral thinking techniques as a way of developing new business ideas. which are examples of lateral thinking techniques. And know that C, business plan, comes up elsewhere in the specification. It's not an example of a lateral thinking technique, therefore it's not going to be C. I'm happy with A and B. Right, okay, so I'd put a cross next to A and B, and away we go. Hope this video was useful for anyone who's been watching it. Please look out on the YouTube channel for more videos which will be coming up very shortly.